Hello, welcome to another episode of Flying High with Flutter. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I'm with Alicja Orga. Well, I'll let you go ahead and introduce your last name because this is the one name I have a problem with. She is a Flutter developer based out of Poland. She just came hot off of the ending of October. You had a Droidcon track, and I saw your talk, and I wanted to bring you on here to talk about Flutter it's full widget tree testing in Flutter. Welcome, Alicja. Would you mind to say your name for us all?
Yes, I'm Alicja Ogonowska. As you said, I'm from Poland, and recently I was able to give my talk about full widget tree testing, both in Droidcon London and also previously in Flutter Vikings Oslo.
So you gave the same talk in two places, is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So Oslo was the first one where I actually applied and prepared everything just for that. And then afterwards, when it was announced that DroidCon will also have a full Flutter track, I was asked if I could give the same presentation again. So I just, polished it. And yeah, actually, I think I did a bit better during DroidCon, especially with the talking, because Oslo was my first time presenting something to a big audience. So of course I was super stressed, and in London I was a bit more relaxed because I knew more or less how it should go. And yeah, so if you want to watch the talk, probably use the DroidCon one, also because this is already published while the Flutter Vikings video is not out yet. But I can say that yeah, probably it's slightly better set.
Now, I'm kind of curious. Like, do you ever feel like it's cheating if you use exactly the same material to present at two different places? You don't feel cheating or kind of being lazy that you use the same thing, or do you feel it's okay and normal?
Well, for me, it was, of course, easier because after giving my first talk, my initial thought was, okay, I probably don't want to do it again because it was super stressful for me. And I also prepared a lot. So probably it would take me a longer time to decide to come up with another talk. But when I was asked, would you like to give the same talk? So it's, much less effort for me. And I agreed. And the second time I enjoyed it much more. So in the end, I thought, okay, I really like this. I can think of some other topics. And yeah, for me, it was a great boost. But is it cheating? I don't think so, because, there are different people viewing different conferences. For example, in London, the DroidCon was all about Android. So there were mostly Android developers because I suppose not many Flutter developers from around the world would travel to London just to see one out of five tracks. So probably it was more of people from England or other Flutter speakers. But yeah, I think it's good to give it even many times, because with each time you improve something, you get better, and also you get to interact with people. So as for me, the more you say it, you get to reach to a bigger amount of people. And that's what we want, right? To spread the word and educate people.
Now, what kind of got you started to actually create this talk? Because I think I can't remember. Was it you and another colleague of yours, or was it the colleague of yours that came up with the idea of full widget testing? Because somehow you gave the talk, but I know you gave a lot of credit to her, I believe, right?
Yeah, so exactly. So in my current project, it's Flaconi. So it's a German beauty e-commerce app. Since over 1 year, Natalie Mas Hooper joined. She was previously working with Google and British Airways, and one of the things she introduced to our team was exactly this. So full widget tree testing, and she was the one who did the initial setup. So when I came up with this idea for this talk, I asked her if it's fine if I will present it, because this is not my original idea, but I wanted to share it with people because we are doing it in our team. I also enjoy writing those tests. And whenever I talked with my Flutter friends from other companies, they seemed interested and wanted to know more. So I just wanted to share the word. And Natalie was kind enough to say, of course, go spread the word. And that's how I ended up doing the presentation and giving the talks.
Now, you find this to be so stressful. I mean, was it just really the desire of spreading the knowledge that made you overcome your fears and want to take the step to present it? Or or you kind of drew what we call draw the shortest straw, where you got pushed into presenting this? I'm just kind of curious about based on you kind of saying that you have a bit of a fear to present, how come you still gave the talk?
Well, it started with another colleague of my team. She shared that there is a Flutter Vikings call for papers and maybe someone has an idea. And my initial thought was like, what could I talk about? I'm not an experienced presenter, so I don't have any talks given in my history. And then at night, somehow I just came up with this idea, and I decided to give it a try. So after I found out that my colleague is fine with me presenting the topic, I applied, and to be honest, I was waiting for the results, and I thought that either way, whether I will be accepted or not, I will be happy, because if they won't accept me, then I don't have to do anything and I can just go on with my life. And if I will be accepted, then surely it will be a challenge, but maybe I will enjoy it.
Now, when you got accepted, what was the first thought and feeling that came to you?
Oh my, what did I do? Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
but
what I had the feeling of. I could imagine, like, okay, I probably want to get selected. You get selected. Oh man, why did I sign up? Is that kind of like the thought came?
yeah. I got this feeling a bit, and then actually I applied for the winter edition of Flutter Vikings. That was also supposed to be in Oslo in February, but then last minute, I would say, it was turned into an online event, and I also had to cancel and move this presentation to the September edition. So I had to like reapply for that, and then again, I wasn't sure if I will be accepted again. And just the same as previously, I had this feeling deep down inside of me, oh, if they will not accept me, then yeah, I will also be fine. But in the end, I am glad that I got accepted, that right now I am after two big conferences, and who knows what the future will hold.
Now, I'm kind of curious. Who invited you to give the same talk in Droidcon?
It was Majid.
Oh, okay, that's right. Majid is one of the talks, right? He gave his talk about security, I believe, right?
Yeah, he even gave two talks. So yeah, he did a lot. Yeah, he and I think Simon Lightfoot were responsible for handling the content of the Flutter track, and he reached out to me whether I would like to go to London. I think it was 1 month before, and I checked my calendar. I said, yeah, why not? And this is how I ended up there.
Oh, that's awesome. I kind of want to go back a little bit to talk about your history, right? Because I always love to hear about, why should we listen to you? Now, what got you into programming to begin with?
Okay, this is actually quite funny, because I started as an architecture student, and I really didn't like it. And I even ended up thinking, okay, I'll just finish my 5 years degrees and then I will just do something else. And I had some friends, because I was part of a students organization, who did the same, and they started making websites. So I thought, okay, maybe I will do it as well. But then somehow, I don't know, I saw somewhere a book about Android development, and I thought, mobile apps also sounds fun. And because I wasn't, that old, I was still able to change my studies, and I just went to computer science and did the full master's degree there. And just this is how I ended up there. Because to be honest, in high school, I was kinda hesitating between going to computer science, but I was already taking drawing lessons for architecture. So I thought, okay, I prepared for so many years, like I cannot waste it. So instead of wasting like 3 years of drawing classes, I wasted 5 years, because yeah, I studied for two, but in the end, it I think paid off.
Now, does that come in handy though, right? Because now you can kind of sketch out what somebody's proposing to do, right? They say, I want this. You can kind of sketch out what that looks like. Does that ever come into handy?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Maybe I'm not a graphic designer myself, but probably I'm a bit more, sensitive to designs than some other developers. So for sure, it wasn't a completely wasted time. But yeah, I'm glad that I switched, and right now I enjoy it much more.
Your first kind of programming, was that straight Java with Android? Because that's what I kind of hear.
Yes, exactly. I started with Java, because back then Java was the language for Android programming. And then when Kotlin appeared, I also moved to Kotlin.
But I mean, Java kind of makes you tear out your hair, right? I mean, Android programming, I don't know. How long ago was this that you started work with Android? Maybe was it Gingerbread, or do you know which version of Android it was?
Yeah, it was 4.4. So I think
Oh,
it
it's
was
KitKat, I
Lolita
believe.
KitKat. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay, so that's quite some time ago. Yeah, because we're at what, Android 18 or something. We're not Oreo or whatever it was. Oh, I don't know what the heck we're at. Pi or something. No, I think we're even past that one. It's like every week there's a new one or something. It's been a while. Okay, so yeah, that was definitely some long time ago. Things have obviously changed back then, right? If you take a look at Android development, like before you went on the Flutter to when you first started, like it's gotten a lot better, right? But do you remember starting off like, what do I have to write? Like, like we're talking before the show, a recycler, all these different things. You're just like, what am I doing? What is all this stuff? Is that came to your mind first?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think, oh my, what is this? I have to write so much because, it was the standard. It was what you had to do. So as we discussed, to write a simple list with displaying some views, you had to write a lot of boilerplate. But this was the way to go. So when I switched to Flutter, that was the moment when I thought, oh, it can be simpler. So before that, I didn't know that you can have, a better life.
Well, let's not skip to the end, right? Let's kind of talk about before you're just doing straight Android, then you went to Flutter. In between, obviously, you had to discover Flutter, right? So, what happened that Flutter came into your life?
Well, actually, one of my colleagues from my previous company was advocating for Flutter for a long time because he was, observing it from, I think, quite early stages. And it's funny because in the end, he was the last one who actually landed a Flutter project in our team, and he was stuck with native Android development, even though the other new projects already started with Flutter. So it was just a company's decision to try out Flutter because there was a new app that had to be done quite quickly with both platforms, and we didn't have a iOS developer available. So there was an idea to give it a try with Flutter, and I said, okay, let's do it. I will learn. And it worked. It just worked out, and I never went back to native Android development.
So, okay, so you had a colleague who was rallying for Flutter. What was he saying about it at the time? Was he just like, how come reload it? Because I don't think, even now, I don't think Android has something similar, right? Maybe Jetpack Compose might have something. I'm not too sure. But what was he kind of saying, well, we should take a look at this stuff? I think that this is a better way to do it.
Mhm. That the performance is good, and before we had, and also that writing the code is just pleasant to the developer because we also had some brief experience with Xamarin, and it wasn't that pleasant to the programmers. So he said, "Okay, this is multi-platform, but it's much better, and it's made by Google, so it's worth taking a look because it probably won't go away so quickly."
That's funny that you say the last one like that because everybody always says the opposite. Because it's made by Google, it may not stick around because they're always famous for that.
Yeah, for now, I think it looks very promising, and also the fact that more and more like serious companies are using Flutter is kind of reassuring. Like recently, there was a big release of a banking mobile app in Poland, so this gives you the view that even the banking. So I would say companies that really take care about quality, safety, maintainability, and stuff like that, if they invest in it, then probably there's something in it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. So when you load up on your computer, right? Did you try it off just for work, or were you just trying out to see what's going on with it?
You mean with Flutter the first time?
Yeah, it's the first time. Yeah.
Okay, so the first time it was just for me, but to be honest, I started taking it more seriously when I knew that I will have to do it. So I knew that at a given date I will start project. So before that, I started, learning more carefully. So not just playing around, but also reading docs, reading tutorials. I think I even had like a course on Udemy or something like that to learn the basics.
And what were your thoughts when you first started to get into it? We were just like, okay, this is interesting. This is nice. Or you're just like, okay, I like this. This is better than what I'm doing now. Or what was the thought?
In the end, it was in the beginning it was difficult for me to switch because for example, the way how you are describing building the views is completely different than in native Android development. So in the beginning, it was weird. Okay, how is it a good thing to define the views in the code, because I was so used to the mainly to the XMLs. But I think, I don't know, after a week or even a shorter period of time, it just felt natural.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Like, I remember making my first Android apps, and I was like, okay, this is super weird with the XML because I first learned iOS, and so I was like, okay, this is nice, drag and drop, can do it all. Okay, IB connecting. Okay, this is weird, but all right. What is XML? We're stepping backwards. I don't think I've ever used XML so much for a long time. And then, yeah, Flutter is totally different, right? You're mixing your view code with your business logic or whatever you want to call it. It's totally a different like mindset, right? But you do gain a lot also from that too, right? Because now you can programmatically create your trees, your view. There's no more XML. That's a big one, right? Do you miss XML?
No, no, I don't miss it at all.
Yeah, I don't think I know anybody who does miss XML from Android days. But was there anything else that really made it more attractive for you?
I like the power of producing two mobile apps at the same time, because previously when I worked in teams where we had Android team and iOS team, there are always some differences. One team struggled with this, the other team struggled with something different. It was hard to deliver similar features at the same time. And when I switched to Flutter, I was responsible for everything, but I had the power to do everything. So I didn't have to worry whether the iOS team will make something on time, because, I was the iOS team. So I was able to just do my best and make sure it is delivered as it's, expected to look and work like.
So when you do your development for this, are you mostly just developing everything on your Android phone, then finally try it out on your iOS? Are you actually trying it out on both, or how do you develop when you're working on this? Because you said you were the iOS team, right?
No, no, no. I mean, right now I am the iOS team because, I'm just the Flutter team, so I do both.
Okay, I see.
But yeah, I mainly develop on my Android device and then I check it on iOS device. So just, I don't know, it's more handy because my Android device is just for work, so it's always right there near my computer, and my iOS device is my private phone, so I use it for other stuff. And yeah.
Now, how was the testing situation when you're in Android, right? Because this episode's all about testing. Now, did you actually do Android testing or not?
To be honest, not so much. I remember there were some problems. I remember using Espresso, I think, for the UI test, but I didn't like it. There were always many, problems. Probably because I used to work on some older projects, and they weren't written with the testing in mind. So probably many components were not testable at all. There was no time, or at least the client was not willing to pay for additional refactor to make it available to be tested. So for sure in Flutter I give more attention to tests, and I'm really glad that I do, and also that I am able to, because it's not only my wish but also the client's desire, and I think this is a blessing.
No, wait. You're saying did I understand correctly that you're saying because testing was not so simple in Android, that's why you didn't focus so much on it? Is that what I heard?
Yes, yes, exactly. And also because I quite often worked with some old code that was written, a few years back. And if they didn't write the code with testing in mind, it was, later very hard to write tests for that, because it was, not testable, because you got errors. As far as I remember, it was hard to mock things because the code was quite awful to tangle. And in this case, the good thing about Flutter is, because Flutter is quite young, I think it's quite rare to land a project that has a long history and a long technical depth, because the technology is younger itself. So usually it's used by new projects, and you start fresh, and you can just write it from scratch, and then you can keep testing in mind.
Okay, that's interesting. So when you write your code for Android, you're saying you need to write in a certain way, or else it's not really easy or even possible to test at all?
Yes, as I remember, but I haven't done any native Android development since I think three years now. But I remember it was much easier to have dependencies coupled, and then it was very hard to mock them during testing.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I know Java's kind of got pretty good testing, right, with JUnit, etc. But I'm not too sure how much stuff could be put into Android. Plus, yeah, running like integration tests, etc., are not that great. When you started your working with Flutter, were you guys writing tests from the beginning, or was this something that after you became comfortable with Flutter, then you started to look at because you had regressions?
Mhm. Okay, so in the project that I'm currently with, there were tests, so I can say that there weren't any. When we were writing unit and integration tests, then a QA engineer joined, and he is responsible for writing integration tests. And then my colleague Natalie joined, and she said, "Okay, now let's write widget tests, but we'll be testing full widget tree." And right now, we have a really good coverage, and because there were some parts of the application that weren't covered and we needed to make a big refactor, we decided to go with the full widget tree test just to speed up the process a little bit, because with them you get to test a lot of code at the same time and cover for the use cases, so test it from the user's perspective. And after that, when we reached the desired code coverage level, we could make a big refactor. And just to give you an overview, it's an e-commerce app, and we refactored things like cart, prices, product, and actually didn't have any big issues after that. So I strongly believe this was because we were well prepared with our tests for that.
So let's go start working into the full widget tree testing, right? It's definitely a mouthful to say, but it does basically describe the process, right? Could you briefly describe what is full widget tree testing in just a couple of sentences?
Of course. So it's just a widget test. That's why it has a widget in its name. But I use a full widget tree to make sure that everyone understands that it's not about testing small widgets in isolation, but the whole app widget tree. So basically, in those tests, you run your whole app every time you test something. So instead of just testing, I don't know, login form, you build your app, you click on the login button, and then from then you can start writing your tests as you would do with a normal widget test. And I think with this approach, you can say that it's a bit like integration testing, because you also run your whole app, but instead of using the real API and networking, you mock your whole API part. So you actually test everything up till network response layer.
Okay. So this is just basically a widget test, right? Because I'm trying to remember. Of course, there's unit tests. So this is just when you have the initial Flutter application, you already have a widgets test. That's basically what it is, right? But
Mhm.
you're testing a lot more than just making sure there's widgets there. You're making
Yeah,
sure that if
exactly.
you tap on something, then something else happens, and then something should change about the widget tree, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I would say for some widgets, it makes more sense to just test them in isolation. If there is a lot happening inside one screen or widget, then just go ahead and test it as a normal widget test. But if you have something more complex and you want to test it as the user would use it, then a full widget tree test is quite useful. For example, recently it was useful to test like navigation from the deep links, and there was a lot happening because for each deep link you had to extract the data from the deep link. For example, if it's a product, you need to get all the details about the product and navigate the user to product details page, etc. And I think with a plain widget test, you wouldn't be able to test it. And with such a test, it's much easier to make sure that the navigation is working fine, that the user is navigating to the right screen, that if they will go back, they will go back to the right place, etc., etc. So you can test more of like user flows. So that's why I also mentioned integration test, because this is quite similar. You test from the user perspective, so user doesn't know if they should test a widget, login form. They will open the app, click on the login button, and do their actions there. So this is what I try to recreate in such tests.
Okay, we have a question from the audience. He asks, does it make sense to consider widget testing as unit testing?
Yeah, if you write plain widget test, then I could agree. But with this kind of testing that I'm describing right here, I think it's not a right description, because you are not testing a unit. So for the full widget tree testing, I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay. Yeah, because if I remember correctly, integration tests, you have to actually have an emulator or a phone running and doing all the stuff. But what you have is basically just a straight widget test, and I'm not even sure what that actually does. I guess it just somehow renders something somewhere where you can. I'm actually not too sure, but do you know how that works in comparison with the two?
Yeah, so it's widget tests. The plain widget tests and full widget tree tests are not do not require any emulator on or device, and it's rendered by Flutter, but you don't see it. So it's happening behind the scenes. And the bad thing is that you are testing your views, but you are not able to see them. So this can be sometimes quite tricky. If the test passes, then it's completely fine. But if it doesn't pass, and it should, then finding the issue can be quite fun. But this is exactly what happens in just plain widget tests. But the good thing is, because this doesn't require a device, it's super quick. So you don't have to worry that you have to build the app each time, because it doesn't require much time, and you can write many tests, many use cases, and the execution is really quick.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, I don't think I've ever written an integration test. Do you guys actually run integration tests or not?
Yes. So I don't write them. I just edit them if a change in the code that I made is making them fail. But we have a dedicated QA engineer, so he's not only doing manual testing, but he's also writing integration tests in Flutter.
Okay. So when would I want to choose an integration test over the full widget tree testing, or even the other way around?
Yeah, we have both, and I think this is a good decision. But we have this comfort that we are able to do so. So the client also wants to have it. One thing that the integration testing gives you is it also integrates with real API, usually on a staging environment. So sometimes it lets you catch some changes on the API, and I've seen it quite a few times, because we also have a web project, and this is the main thing. The mobile app is like the smaller client. So sometimes there were some changes that we weren't clearly informed about, and actually integration tests started failing. And once we started checking, okay, something changed in the API. So this is like another level of making sure that everything in your system is working. So if your backend is first deployed to staging and then to production, you have this moment where you can spot some changes or errors happening there, and make sure they are not deployed to production before you are aligned with them.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that does make sense. I've heard integration tests. I've heard of different things where, to me, integration tests could also mean that you're working across all everything. So, like your full widget tree testing, I would consider that one to be integration testing. But I see what you mean. Actually, integrating with a real system, right?
Mhm.
That's how you treat it as. Okay. I've also heard that also called a smoke test. I'm not too sure why. I guess because if something big break, I mean, you'd see smoke coming out of it. Okay, here we go. This is a good question. So same audience members also asking, do you test full widget tree or do you have separate test files for similar subtrees? So I guess this means instead of just testing the full widget tree, do you ever maybe test parts of it all by itself?
I'm not sure if I get it clearly, so I will talk about it a bit. And if it's not exactly this answer, then please let me know. So we try to make those tests as small as possible. So when you have a big new screen, big new feature, we create usually one file. If it's very complicated, then we put it into smaller files. For example, because you are building the application each time, and each time you are on the same screen, but there are many different scenarios. So we have a separate test for just making sure that everything is displayed correctly in the happy path. Then we are checking for various error scenarios. Then we do the navigation, the possible navigations to this screen, from the screen, etc. So the more complex the screen is, the more tests we write, but we try to make each test as small as possible, and not to test all the cases in one test, because then even writing the test name is complicated. Like, I can open the login screen and log in, and if I put a wrong password, I will see a hint that it's wrong. So I don't do that. I try to keep it as simple as possible. So each test has a readable name, and then if something fails, you can quickly know, even from just reading the name of the test, what could possibly go wrong there. So was this the question about, or?
I think it's related. What I understand from his question is, besides full widget tree testing, do you also have widget testing where you don't test the full app, the full widget tree? You're just testing part of the widget tree, maybe being a little bit more exhaustive about it. That's what I think his question is.
Okay. Yes, of course. Sometimes we just write widget tests. Also, there are many plain widget tests from the time where we didn't have the full widget tree test. So we just maintained them and, kept them as there is. I think especially for the forms, it's quite useful to just write the tests on their own and focus on all the validations there. Yeah, and also still we are taking care of unit tests. So with this approach, I won't be saying, okay, now just drop everything and write only full widget tree tests, because they are the way to go. I think the best way to go is have a diverse set of tests, and then you can actually sleep good at night, because you have covered a lot of code, and if anything goes wrong, you will be alarmed.
Okay. Now, the next question that he also has, which I think is a really good question, is how do you actually organize your test files? Because now you're not only just testing the full widget tree sometimes, you also have your subtrees, as we call it, right? The smaller, more focused widget testing that's not the full widget tree experience, right? How do you actually organize your tests?
Okay, so yeah, we organize them by folders. The folder structure is the same as the folder structure for the code itself. So it's divided into features, and then inside features, if we have a screens folder, then this is where we are having the full widget tree testing. And if you want to test for a plain widget, then you put it in the widget folder inside the folder structure.
Okay, that makes sense. But I think another part of what you do actually relies upon using Git, right? Isn't that kind of the secret sauce for how you do full widget tree testing?
Absolutely not. I just used it for the app for my presentation for my talks, but in our project we use a different solution, so it's completely irrelevant.
Sorry, I was kind of curious. So for me, I mean, Git is the solution for dependency injection within the middle of your trees, right? How else can you inject what you want to inject? Because even in your demo, right, you're replacing the what you call the network layer, the DO or DIO library. How would you do that without something like Git? Or are you actually using something similar to Git?
No, we are using something similar to get it. So in the project we have Kiwi. So it was a decision made by, I don't know, some developers that don't work anymore. So I won't advocate for this decision. But yeah, I think anyway you need something similar to Kiwi or get it or anything that will let you, handle your dependencies. So without that, I agree. I think it would be hard to do it.
I don't think I've ever heard of Kiwi. I mean, you're going to make Thomas very upset if you're not using Git it. You know that, right?
Yeah, we are really, I don't know who will listen to that, maybe a maintainer of Kiwi, but I think we have replacing Kiwi somewhere in the backlog. So
Okay. I've never heard of Kiwi, so I'm interested to see what it's like. Maybe, do you mind to tell me what's the difference between Kiwi and Git it? Or are they just so similar that they're kind of replaceable?
I would say they are very similar. So it's basically you just have to register your dependencies, and that's it. So for the tests, you can decide that some dependencies, instead of using the same classes that you use in your actual code, you can just use your mocks, and that's it.
Okay, this is an interesting question. I'm not even sure how you can answer this one. Yes, how does widget tree testing go with the state management?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand this question, but in full widget tree testing, we are not thinking about the state management. If I understand the question correctly, so I'm usually using block, and in full widget tree tests, I don't care if there is a block or not. I think in the setup, if I need a block, then I need to use a block provider, of course. But that's it. And inside the tests, you are just expecting to see something on the screen, and you are not interested if it was provided by Block, by Riverpod, or whatever you are using.
Well, I guess even RiverPod, right? Everything is still kind of connected to the tree, no matter what, even because it has provider scope at the top. So yeah, I can see that.
But if you are making the full widget tree test, then you are actually pumping the same widget that you are using in the run up method. So you should have everything that you need already there. So inside the test, you shouldn't have to worry about the state management.
So is there any widgets that you actually do end up turning off when you're running full widget tree testing, or really it's just straight like you pull in the app? Because I saw your example was like constant return app, or sorry, return const to app, but there could be some things that you do end up turning off. I'm not too sure, but really you're turning everything.
Yeah, I'm just thinking. So, for example, in my like professional project, I think we have some stuff before running the app, like setting up Firebase, and this is excluded. So stuff like this, some third parties. Yeah, I think so. And for example, yeah, when you are using the Get It or Kiwi or whatever works, sometimes you can also exchange some classes. Like if you are using some third-party providers that you don't want to interact with them because I don't know, like for the deep linkings, I was using the URI package, I think, something like this, and because it was impossible to test it, I decided to write a wrapper around it, and for the test I was just using my own mock, and it was easy, to mock, okay, this deep link appeared, another deep link appeared, etc. So I think if you are writing such tests, you can also improve your app architecture and abstract the stuff away, and don't rely directly on some third parties or even the native plugins.
Okay, going back to the question about state management and full widget tree testing. The reason he said he asked is because sometimes there's some cases where some UI decisions can occur from when you read something from the block. Okay, like for sure, what I can tell you is like we have for one app, what we do have is we have like so we have different environments, right? We have a staging, what we call, and we have a production. And when we're developing the app, usually we update the back end on the staging environment, and then the my client will be having to connect to staging to make that happen, right? And so there's a configuration block that actually has this information. And it's also important too because what we actually do is, that little debug banner on the side,
Hmm.
we actually have the block that actually creates that on the UI. So it says you're in staging, because what actually happens is like, okay, can you test this? Oh, it's broken. Well, are you using staging or using production? So we had to had that staging thing in the corner. So now it's very clear where he is. So then there's no confusion. And obviously only for staging, because that way, we don't want customers seeing production on the side. It just doesn't look professional. So I think that's what he's talking about, is that sometimes you may be using a block to change the UI, right? That's just one real use case that I can give to you. So that's what I believe what his question comes from.
Okay, but if you are just running your app as usual, then if I understand this correctly, you should already have your blog there in the widget tree. And if there is some action happening, then it will just happen and the changes should be visible and you could test for them.
Yeah, I guess what you could do is you could just manually put whatever you want to check, right? So in my case, if you're allegedly using staging, then you should see the banner in the corner, this kind of thing, right? That would be the way I would test that solution. And if you aren't, then you should see whatever. But that could also be a very focused widget test, right? I think you talked a little bit before, like, but how do I know, like, what should be part of a full widget tree test and what should be a more focused widget test?
I would say whatever works for you, because I'm not the kind of person that will say, okay, this is the only good way and all the other solutions are wrong, because I think wrong is to have no tests at all. That's the one thing that I can agree with. And from then I would say just whatever works for you. And if you struggle with full widget tree testing, then I wouldn't force it, and it's fine to keep write more sophisticated tests as widget tests, but I would just try to write some basic navigation flows or user flows to make sure that the user will be able to use the app as it's intended to be used.
I would basically sum it up as saying have testing as much as possible. Prefer to do as exhaustive as you can. How do you say that? Uh, Integration tests are good, but yeah, I had something better in my mind, but I feel like maybe you're better at this than me. But yeah, basically, there's a way that you can reap the benefits of both the integration tests along with widget testing, right? Which would be the full widget tree testing. So you're treating a widget tree test as an integration test without all the setup involved, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, the only bad thing is if you skip tests completely. And anything additional to that, if you write tests, then it's just good for you. So as for me, I think it's important to write all different kind of tests, because they have pros, cons, and limitations. And if you have different kinds, then your code is well covered, in my opinion.
Okay, I think we have one last question. Do you write widget tests for screens that are static? Basically, there's no different UI changes.
Yeah, just to keep the code coverage at not lower it, but they are really simple to write. So once you have the setup, it doesn't really make that much difference whether you'll write it as a plain widget or the full tree widget. So yeah, I would say I won't advocate for one option or the other. As long as the screen is tested, it should be just fine.
Yeah, I don't think I have any more questions. Do you have anything that you want to let people to know? I know you do it. Your presentation is up, right? It's on the Droidcon website. I think you gave us a link. I watched it today. Obviously, your presentation is there. Yeah, you watch yourself.
I no, I didn't watch. I just wanted to hear myself, because in the beginning I didn't want to listen to it, because it's kind of uncomfortable for me to listen to my own voice on recording. But today I listened to the whole talk, and yeah, I think it wasn't bad. So you can go check it out.
Okay. Yeah, I used to listen to my own podcast, but then I don't know. I think I just stopped because it's like you. I start to nitpick it, like, oh, how come the audio's not so good here, or oh, I sound like stupid on here, etc.
Yeah, what I want to say, that if anyone from the audience or whoever will be watching this wants to reach out, then I am happy to chat and listen to your opinions. Because after the last two conferences, I found out that people do this. They do full widget tree testing just without giving it a name. So maybe they have some other ideas that they would like to share, and I'll be happy to know, because maybe there is something that I can improve in. And I just think that giving it a name makes a distinction, so that people know that I'm not talking about widget tests as they are described in documentation, but something a bit broader.
We do have I think it's one last question from the same guest who's been asking all the questions. So that's fine. He's your number one fan, I suppose.
What's the
Um,
name?
I'm always never good with his name. I'll share with you. I really feel bad for always how to say his name. Are you responsible for the test coverage amount in your consultancy work?
You mean responsible? So, well, whenever I write code, I always check the test coverage and I try to not lower it. That's for sure. If I have time, then I try to also add some tests. But it's not like someone is saying, okay, Alicia, the code coverage is too low. What are you going to do about it? We have a big team, and this is inside our team agreement that every team member is responsible for taking care of that. So basically, we don't accept any pull requests without tests. And that's it.
That's good. Do you also have the whoever breaks the build is in charge of doing something? I forgot what they usually do now. Like they take over making sure the building is working okay or something. I forgot what happens. But do you have anything about punishment of people who break the build or break the test coverage?
No, we don't. But we are a good team, and just without even discussing it, this is what we do. So if you break something, then we just try to fix it as quick as possible, probably before anyone notices.
Okay. That's no fun. It should be whoever breaks the build gets broken, I guess. Maybe I'm from a different engineering culture. Okay. Again, I appreciate your time, and yeah, he feels bad. He has too many questions. He thinks he says, "I
No,
promise I don't
thank
ask
you.
any more questions." No, but yeah, keep them coming. Keep you on your toes, right? Again, I appreciate your time, and yes, you guys can feel free to reach out to her. She is extremely responsive and very good to chat with over Twitter DM. So I'm happy that you were able to come on and explain and talk and everything like that. Appreciate your time on a Saturday, no less. Right? You should be going out and enjoying yourself.
No, it's just the middle of the day, so I still have a full afternoon.
Okay, it's the end of the day over here. It's about 10 p.m. right now.
Sorry.
No need to be sorry. It's fine. I don't mind at night. Okay, cool. Again, thank you for your time, and yeah, let's see if how many more times you're going to give the talk, and maybe you'll be an expert in this subject. I'll be looking at you for
Okay, thank you.
testing
Yeah.
Queen.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. And surely I will be thinking about a new presentation topic for the future.
Yeah, it's not so bad what you do it the first time, right? Or not the second time.
Yeah. I was also invited to give it on a Polish meetup in Polish, so I would need to translate it. I had to, I couldn't accept the invitation just because of the date, but maybe if they'll have another edition, then I can do this talk again. But after that, I think I need to come up with something new.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of curious, like, because I'm kind of spoiled with the fact where obviously English, American English is my native language. Is it really difficult to translate these things from English to your native language?
I mean, it will be much quicker. So when I was asked if I could give this talk in Polish, I thought, yeah, okay, I can just do it like really quickly because it will be just about translating. And I think from this translated even in my head the speech itself from English to Polish, I think I could give it, I could do it on the fly. But the other way around would be more difficult. Yeah, I'm not a native English speaker, so this is also something that is stressful for me because I'm giving a talk in not my mother tongue. So sometimes I'm missing a word, and this is stressful. But I guess if I would be stressed, then probably I would even forget Polish words. So
It's interesting because when I talk to Dutch people and also local Hong Kong people who do computer programming, I send them the documentation in their language, and they always dislike it. They say, "Please send me the English one," because I guess once it's translated into their native language, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense. The terms just don't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, I don't read anything programming related in Polish. Also, because there are some words that you can't really translate, and if you try to translate them, they just sounds funny and totally not right. So I prefer to stick to English, as this is my professional language. So anyway, in my day-to-day work, I have to use it. So I try to also learn in English.
Okay. I wish I could understand what that feels like, but to be honest, I'd be honest with you. I think I told this a couple of times, but when I moved to Hong Kong, I had to download a dictionary because some of the English over here I've never heard before in my life.
Okay.
So there's just different words that come from UK because of the history, right? And they also have their own way of talking too, which is really weird. But anyways, enough culture bashing. I appreciate you to come on and to talk about your talk, and let's see if we'll catch you on another conference with a new talk.
Yeah, I hope so. Thank you for having me here. It was really nice.
No problem. Thank you.